On a rainy spring morning of March 3, 1845, a boy was born in St. Petersburg who was destined to become one of the greatest mathematicians of his time, and his set theory would literally overturn centuries of humanity's ideas about the nature of infinity. His name was George Cantor. Cantor studied in the best educational institutions of his time, made progress in mathematics, and while studying at the University of Berlin, he first had a dream to become a teacher there. His father wrote about him. He is gifted by nature with a desire for order, prevailing over everything else. Just think about it. At just 23 years old, he receives a Doctor of Science for his work on number theory, and he starts work at Martin Luther University of Halle-Wittenberg as a private associate professor. But it was there that he formulated his theory, which literally became the basis of the cutting edge of modern mathematics. Set theory. This theory led him to many seemingly paradoxical conclusions. Cantor's research seems intuitively contradictory to us, but ultimately understandable. Now, it will be a little difficult, but believe me, it is interesting, and it will also come in handy for us. If you appreciate the content, please show your support by liking, subscribing to the channel, leaving a comment, and sharing this video with your circle. Your engagement greatly aids the algorithm. Since ancient times, mathematicians have distinguished two types of infinity, potential and actual. When we, for example, consider a series of natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, and so on to infinity, each new number we get by adding to the previous one. Such infinity appears to us as a kind of process. We literally build this series according to the principle of n plus 1. The series 1, 2, 3 has no last element. After all, we can always add 1. Therefore, every single result of such a series, for example, up to the number of 7 trillion, is finite and is achieved in a finite number of steps. Such a series is considered a potential infinity. But if we consider an infinity in which all the natural numbers are covered at once, their complete set to which no new number can be added, because they are already all inside, then such an infinity, which is a kind of vessel in which the series of potential infinity unfolds, will already have relative completeness and will be considered actual. A multitude is a large quantity that allows itself to be perceived as one. George Cantor. Aristotle, whose opinion was shared by all other mathematicians until the 19th century, believed that actual infinity was impossible in mathematics. Its very notion is inadmissible, and a scientist needs any large but still finite value. Galileo, in the 17th century, generally deduced a paradox that if actual infinity in mathematics would be accepted, the number of even numbers in them should be the same as even and odd together, which contradicts logic because the whole must be greater than the part. Cantor, on the other hand, held that a set is infinite if it is equal to one of its subsets, and finite if it is not equal to any of them. But what does this even mean? For example, let's imagine a wallet. It contains rubles, euros, dollars, yuan. The sum of rubles in it can be counted, and it seems to be obviously less than the total sum of all the money together with these rubles. Hence, the set of money in the wallet is unfortunately finite. But what about infinite sets? Cantor stated that what Galileo thought was a paradox is, in fact, an inherent property of them. For example, the set of positive even numbers is equivalent to the set of all natural numbers, since we can pair every element of both sets without missing a single number. Let's take a look at these two sets. If we were to consider a finite interval of a series, for example, from 1 to 10, it would be easy to see that there are 10 natural numbers in it, and only 5 even numbers. That is, the set of even numbers on this interval is twice as small. It is just like with money in a purse. Moreover, some numbers of the upper row are left without a pair. But if we consider an infinite series, this logic is no longer applicable. We see that every even number corresponds to a natural number. A 2 is a 1, a 10 is a 5. 144 will correspond to 72. We, as if count with the help of natural numbers, all even numbers. And we cannot find such numbers that would be left without a pair, since all numbers of both sets can be arranged in pairs. Such sets are equivalent. Yes, in this case, the whole is equal to one of its parts. And all these are only a tiny fraction of his ideas, which met with serious criticism during Cantor's lifetime, thus depriving him of the opportunity to realize his dream. One of the main opponents of his theories was Leopold Kronecker, head of the Department of Mathematics at the very University of Berlin. And this confrontation lasted practically Cantor's entire life. Just imagine, all his life he developed and supplemented his theory, and all his life he was criticized because of it. Of course, there were those who supported him, but many prominent mathematicians of the time, among them Henri Poincaré, Hermann Weyl, Leuwenhoek, considered Cantor's proofs often not constructive. Kronecker, for example, considered the notion of actual infinity absurd, and Poincaré generally called Cantorism a serious disease that had afflicted mathematical science and publicly expressed the hope that a future generation would be cured of it. What made the situation even worse was that the first version of set theory was found to contain many contradictions. Unfortunately, this story would not have a happy ending. Cantor brought the theory to fruition, although it is now, as the basis of modern set theory, a little condescendingly called naive. He achieved the recognition of many distinguished scientists and even initiated the creation of the International Congress of Mathematicians, which, by the way, is still held every 4 years. But, in the end, criticism and doubts about his own correctness led him to periodic bouts of depression since 1884, until his death. He either continued his research and teaching activities or underwent prolonged courses of treatment. Cantor, retired in 1913, lived in poverty and starved during World War. He celebrated his 70th birthday at his home, but spent the last years of his life in a Halle mental institution, where he died of a heart attack on Jan. He was the only mathematician and philosopher who believed that actual infinity not only exists, but is in a full sense comprehensible by man. Professor Alexei Stakov. But it is high time to find out what this question is from the title of the video. For what we will move from the birth of George Cantor for another half-century in the past. 1794. France is in the midst of a revolution. King Louis XVI is executed. The young French Republic is threatened by war and internal unrest, escalating into rebellion. Against this backdrop, the Convent National, convened after Louis' deposition, adopts a new constitution. Some members of the convent, however, remain unhappy with it, as instead of the meticulously drafted draft of a truly popular constitution was adopted another, hastily written by Hérault de Seychelles. One of the discontented then publishes a message to the people in which he reveals the many shortcomings of the adopted document and points out their dangerous consequences. For this, the convent outlaws him. His friends conceal him. And only at the end of writing his last major work, he, not wishing to expose his friends to danger, March 26, leaves the hideout. Quickly caught and sent to Bourg-la-Reine prison on March 29. 3 days later, he is found dead during a morning round of the cells. He had been poisoned, presumably by the poison he always wore on his ring. The convent, which owed him much but condemned him, subsequently decreed the publication of that very last work of the chief philosophical and historical work of the famous French philosopher Nicolas de Condorcet, a sketch historical picture of the progress of the human mind. No one has ever supposed that the mind can exhaust both all the facts of nature and the last means of precision in measuring, in analyzing these facts, and the relations of objects to each other, and all possible combinations of ideas. But it was conceivable that man, being able to know only a part of the objects accessible to him by virtue of the nature of his mind, should at last meet a boundary where the number and complexity of those he knows would absorb all his powers, and any new progress would become really impossible for him. Sounds pessimistic, doesn't it? Can we reproach a man with such an unjust fate with pessimism? Probably, in his place, many people would be disappointed in humanity. Many, but not Condorcet. In his extensive research, he tried to establish the regularities of history, its main stages and driving forces, with one purpose: to find the limit of human abilities. And in the end, he comes to the following conclusion. All these causes of the perfection of the human race, all these means of securing it, must, by virtue of their nature, have always an active effect and acquire ceaselessly increasing dimensions. We might conclude that the human capacity to improve is limitless. That is, as long as we exist as a species, we will have the capacity to cognize new things. Can man learn everything at all? Can man, in his quest for truth, reach the limit of knowledge? Purely intuitively, I think many of you would answer these questions in the negative. So, most likely, no. Trying to answer these questions, we will literally at every stage encounter arguments that contradict the possibility of complete and comprehensive cognition. Moreover, since this question lies rather in the philosophical plane, we will not find an unambiguous answer. Therefore, I propose to you to find the conditions, the way to such cognition. We will have to make assumptions, and I hope enough reasonable assumptions to answer the main question at the end: how to cognize everything. And that is the central question of humanity, at least a not inconsiderable part of it. Let's put it this way. What do you think is the global goal of humanity? It's hard to say, because even with globalization, we as a species are still very fragmented. Many countries, cultures, worldviews, some of which are literally opposite. What kind of common goal can we talk about? But man is a biological creature, and he still has such a goal: the propagation of the species, its prosperity. And such a global goal, of course, includes a variety of activities, ranging from physical reproduction and ending with highly intellectual activities to extract new knowledge. It is science that has given us the opportunity to expand the habitat of our species to the entire globe, to form a comfortable and safe environment. It has paved the way to other planets. And what comes next? All of this has been made possible by man's pursuit of the knowledge that has provided all of this. Most people who have achieved success in one sphere or another note the importance of goal setting. Moreover, the more specific the goal, the stronger its effectiveness as a motivator of activity. Cognition for a person now is practically adrift in the endless ocean of the unknown. But what if such an ocean still has a distant, almost indistinguishable shore? Will it not beckon us, appearing on the horizon every time and giving us strength to row towards it, even slowly? That is why it is important for us to know whether cognition has a concrete limit, and what conditions must come together for us to be able to know everything. The goal has been dealt with. Therefore, I propose to start our search from the origins. In general, questions of cognition are literally what gnoseology studies. In brief, it is a section of philosophy that studies the possibilities of human cognition of the world, the structure of cognitive activity, the forms of knowledge in its relation to reality, the criteria of its truth and reliability, its nature and boundaries. In other words, it studies cognition. But the true flowering of the ideas of gnoseology reached in the new time, and this flowering is inextricably linked to the name of Immanuel Kant. It is believed that it was Kant and his critical philosophy that revolutionized this science, similar to the Copernican revolution in astronomy. So, as a result of Kant's activity, instead of the usual anthology of his time, the main question of which was, what is being? Gnoseology, what is knowledge, came to the forefront. Indeed, in order to find the limit of knowledge, it would be good to first define what it is at all. There are a great number of definitions. One of the most widespread and comprehensive of them was proposed by Vladimir Filatov. He believed that knowledge is defined as corresponding to the real state of affairs. That is true, substantiated by facts and rational arguments of human beliefs. Is it possible to speak about the truth of objectivity of the information that we can cognize, given that, passing it through the senses, our mind, we inevitably make it subjective? The question is a rhetorical one, answered by Socrates. I know only that I know nothing. This is only the first barrier in our path, and to overcome it, let us turn to two opinions regarding the cognizability of the world: the epistemological optimists and the pessimist. The optimists declared that the world is truly knowable, and if something is still unclear to man, then with the passage of time, developing and improving, he will definitely understand everything. Hegel, for example, believed that reality is only different phases of self-knowledge, a certain world mind, and that human cognitive activity is its final phase. He was convinced that as a result of this activity, sooner or later, this universal mind would come to know itself completely. Engels, and later Lenin, argued that the development of cognition inevitably brings us closer to absolute truth, and the whole progress of mankind is, in fact, an approximation of the degree of truth of the knowledge it has accumulated to the absolute. This is literally the limit of cognition, where X is some measure of truth. Pessimists, however, argued the opposite, denying the possibility of reliable knowledge of the essence of the world. Kant, who, incidentally, was an adherent of this point of view, introduced two basic concepts: phenomenon, the sides of the object manifested in experience, and things in themselves, sides that are fundamentally beyond the boundaries of experience. For example, light. We can measure its brightness and speed, but what properties, irrespective of experience and the use of instruments, does it have in itself? Or cold. We perceive it as a lack of warmth, a low temperature, feel through chills, goosebumps on our skin. But what is cold in isolation from the temperature, pressure, molecular velocity of our sensations? This question is not quite correct because it refers to things in themselves. According to Kant, things in themselves are unknowable. We can only cognize our own reaction to them. Of course, if we are looking for a way to know everything, we have to join the optimists. Let us take the side of Hegel, who believed that the thing in itself is only an initial moment, a stage in the development of a thing. Thus, for example, a man in himself is a child. A sprout is a plant in himself. All things are first in themselves, but the matter does not stop there. The thing in itself develops by entering into manifold relations. It can be cognized through our impressions of it. That's already a pretty serious assumption. Besides, by accepting this view, it is as if we have to reject the infinity of the universe. But we'll come back to that. So, we assume that the world is cognizable after all. Moreover, quite a bit of it, such as some of the laws of physics and chemistry, we already know. In the course of time, with the discovery of new facts and means of measurement, they will certainly undergo changes and perhaps will be very different from what we know. But they describe already known processes and phenomena from which we will inevitably face the problem of what is incomprehensible when something becomes cognizable. Here, for example, do you know a word with a maximum number of meanings? I'm sure that you regularly use this word without realizing its uniqueness. The world record holder is officially considered to be the English verb to set with its 430 meanings, and unofficially, to run 645 values. What's the problem here? It is not to say that you do not know the verb to run, but it turns out that you do not know it in full. Moreover, if this word is used in speech, sooner or later, its meaning will change, and an individual person, not being the receptacle of the whole language, may not even know about it. And this is only one word. It is quite possible that in the vast universe, the laws of physics operate differently than we now understand, or even can imagine. It would be too presumptuous to assume that if we know something in one place, we automatically know it in the entire universe as well. It turns out that even if we know something, we probably don't know it completely. So how can we solve this problem? Perhaps the most logical option is to increase the speed and scale of cognition up to the level when first we will cover all available space of the universe with our attention, in parallel reaching the speed of appearance of any new phenomena, and then we will reach the point when any new thing will be cognized at the moment of its appearance. Is it possible to reach such a speed? Condorcet's quote from the beginning of the video, by the way, has a sequel related to this. As the mind rises to more complex combinations, simpler formulas soon make them easy to it. And truths, discoveries costing great effort, are soon worked out and proved by methods which the ordinary mind can comprehend. Let the strength and real volume of human minds remain the same, but the instruments which they may use will be multiplied and improved. The language which strengthens and defines ideas may acquire greater precision, greater generality, and the methods by which man will be guided in discovering new truths will equally add energy both to his strength and to the rapidity of his action. But to what limits? Certainly, man as a species is hardly capable of the necessary speed of cognition in its present form, which has a monstrous number of limitations within the universe. First of all, we will not have enough time. For example, the life expectancy of girls born in 2016 is 74 years. Boys, 70 years. No matter how optimistic we are, it is hardly possible to learn all the secrets of the universe in such a short period of time. Of course, we are not talking about one single person, a genius like no one in human history has ever known, sitting down at his desk and suddenly starting to learn. But if we, as a species, are ever able to accumulate all the knowledge in huge databases, will a single person even have enough time to read them? I'm not even talking about memorization. At the moment, according to various estimates, the approximate amount of information the human brain can store is between 1 and 2.5 million gigabytes. Is that a lot? For example, the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series, George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, when downloaded to your phone, weighs just over 2 megabytes when downloaded to your phone. That is, we can theoretically memorize this amount of text about 500 million times. 2.5 million gigabytes. This figure seems incredibly large, considering that the same scientists have calculated that it takes only a little more than 1.5 megabytes to memorize the entire English language. Of course, this amount of memory is approximate because our brain, memory, and cognition processes are still not fully understood. But logically, given the finite number of neural connections, the place in it is also finite. You may object, because there is an opinion that man uses only 10% of his brain. The theory is appealing, because if a small fraction of our capabilities has allowed humanity to climb to the top of the food chain, build cities, and come close to interplanetary flight, what would we achieve if we used our brains to their full potential? In pop culture, for example, stories about superhumans with virtually limitless potential are based on this assertion. It's a flattering picture. Too bad, it's far from the truth. And I'll give you just the simplest argument. Ear muscles. How many people do you know who can move their ears? Nowadays, it's a skill we only need for entertainment. But our distant ancestors could move their ears to better hear predators, relatives, or prey. Over the course of evolution, the need for this has diminished markedly. Our body, indeed like the bodies of all living things, strives for maximum energy efficiency. Therefore, in the absence of the need for such muscles, it gradually changed, turning them into rudiments. Indeed, why waste energy on something you don't use? It's the same situation with the brain. If we did not use 90% of such an energy, consuming organ and the brain for a second can consume up to 20% of a person's total energy, while making up only 2% of the total body mass. It would simply degenerate and shrink over time. To overcome such limits, it seems you'd have to be some kind of superhuman. Not quite. Nietzsche considered his Superman to be a creator, but at the same time, it is a self-centered being. One of his main qualities is the will to power. For him, modern society is only a substrate on which a new species must emerge. Different from us, according to the thinker, just as we are different from the apes. At the same time, these differences do not concern mainly physical qualities, but rather morality, attitude to the world and people. Therefore, such a superhuman, most likely, will not become a solution to the problem of cognition, but perhaps only throw the world into chaos. When considering Nietzsche, one cannot fail to mention his psychological health. We began this video with the story of George Cantor. In the last years of his life, he was diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder. Nietzsche, for his part, was subject to nuclear mosaic schizophrenia. Don't you think that cognition seems to drive those who try to reach its depths crazy? You say 2 cases is not a pattern, but are there 2? Empedocles, who thought he was God. Pythagoras, who declared beans to be the focus of evil. Tesla's obsessive-compulsive disorder. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's persecution mania. John Nash's schizophrenia. The list of creators with mental disorders could go on almost forever. Even Newton is considered to have a mild form of schizophrenia, and Albert Einstein is now attributed to a mild form of autism. It's important to realize that cause and effect can vary from case to case. And while Einstein's and Newton's disorders rather contributed to their activities by shaping the personalities of these scientists in a certain way, in the case of Cantor and Nietzsche, their illnesses probably progressed precisely because of their activities. Cantor's story is important to today's issue. It perfectly illustrates the fact that a human being, no matter how brilliant he is still a human being. Under the influence of stress, doubt, failure, our psyche can sooner or later give us slack. Cantor, who knew it better, many advanced in the knowledge of certain things, much deeper than most of his contemporaries, and remained misunderstood by them. He remained practically alone with infinity, with its mysteries, only slightly touched them with his mind. And that surely leaves its mark. Are you sure that your consciousness, your psyche, the psyche of any person in general, is ready for the revelations that remain hidden for us now? For example, imagine that you have received a message in which your meaning of life is formulated. It seems to be something exciting. You may think of your exclusivity, the only person who truly knows what he or she is living for. Sounds beautiful. And then, in anticipation of something great, you open the message, and there it is. Your meaning of life was to share gum with your deskmate 15 years ago. Stupid. Impossible. How do we know it's not? So, can you live with that kind of knowledge? And with millions of other facts, the knowledge of which can literally drive you insane? So, what's the bottom line? Let's try to summarize our journey. To recognize everything, we will have to accept the possibility of true cognition, to acquire advanced, practically immortal bodies, with brains millions of times more capacious and faster, and hardened psyche, able to bear the weight of the revealed truths. At the same time, solving global problems of mankind like food and resource shortages, wars, epidemics, global warming. And our sun will actually destroy the Earth in 5-6 billion years, unless some asteroid manages to do it before then. Sounds, let's be honest, a bit difficult. So what, you ask? All this time you've been watching this video just to come to a dead stop. Perhaps there is a fairly realistic path, but in its appeal, it may be far more disastrous for humanity than all of the above scenarios. So what is that path? Let me start from afar. According to the World Intellectual Property Organization, around 400,000 patents were granted worldwide in 1985. 24 years later, in 2009, that number doubled to 800,000. How many years do you think it took for humanity to make another doubling? We passed the mark of 1,600,000 patents in 2020. That means it took 11 years for the number of registered discoveries to double again, which is more than twice as fast. In terms of the number of applications filed, by the way, the situation is not much different. Extrapolating these data, we will see that in 2025, there should already be 3.2 million patents, and we will reach 6.4 in 2027. What's next? Here we come up against the concept of technological singularity. I will not go into the topic of technological singularity, as it is rather suitable for a separate video. Therefore, within the framework of our search, we will consider only two aspects: the realism of its occurrence and whether it is the path to the knowledge of everything. In the context of such reflections, the notion of technological leaps often arises, the most recent of which is the technological singularity. This graph shows the points in the development of mankind from the origin of life on the planet to the present day, depending on the time, until the next leap, each of which significantly accelerated the evolution of man and his environment. Here, as in the number of patents graph, we can clearly see a decreasing trend in the time between the most significant events, from biological events such as the emergence of primates or the uprightness of our ancestors thousands of years ago, to the technological leaps we are witnessing now. The pace is steadily increasing, and in the context of this and all of the above, the final leap, the technological singularity, seems almost inevitable and in the very near future. What is it? The term was coined by mathematician and science fiction writer Vernor Vinge in 1993 in his essay Coming Technological Singularity. In brief, the technological singularity is a supposed moment in the future when technological development will accelerate to such an extent that it will be beyond human comprehension, unmanageable and irreversible. From that point on, technology will develop so rapidly that any even short-term planning will become impossible. Vinge saw the approximate timing of its occurrence this way: I would be surprised if it happened before 2005 or later than 2030. Surprisingly close to our forecast, isn't it? What's more, the primary method of achieving it is currently considered to be artificial intelligence. One of the founders of the technological singularity hypothesis, Irving John Good, in his work Speculations concerning the first ultra-intelligent machine, writes, "Let us call an ultra-intelligent machine far superior in intellectual activity to any human being, no matter how smart he may be. Since designing machines is also such an activity, the ultra-intelligent machine will be able to design machines even better, which will no doubt be an intellectual explosion that will leave human intelligence far behind. Thus, the first ultra-intelligent machine will be the last invention that man will have to make, provided that machine is kind enough to tell us how to keep it under control. Sounds both mesmerizing and frightening at the same time. Even more disturbing is the fact that we are literally one step away from creating such a machine. There are three types of artificial intelligence: weak, strong, and that ultra-intelligent machine. With weak intelligence, you have probably encountered. These are, for example, computer opponents in various games such as chess or strategy, voice assistants in smartphones and smart speakers. Their main weakness is that they work within a predetermined range, meaning that they can only handle one specific problem, be it playing a game or searching for music on the internet. Strong artificial intelligence, intelligence that is similar to human intelligence, will be able to perform tasks that only humans are capable of in nature. Abstract thinking, planning, strategizing, creativity, and more. Such machines will have a consciousness somewhat similar to human consciousness. It is believed that modern artificial intelligence such as ChatGPT is already approaching this boundary, but they have not yet reached it. The third type is the ultra-intelligent artificial intelligence. Its intelligence will be far superior to ours. Therefore, imagining its capabilities is quite problematic. The heights it is capable of reaching are beyond our minds, and assumptions become meaningless. This is how people in the 20th century saw the progress of mail in the year 2000. The speed of message delivery in their minds depended only on the physical speed of the letter carrier, and they couldn't even imagine electronic letters. In the same way, modern people will not be able to even imagine the superintelligence abilities of the future. What, for example, do bees think of the beekeeper? Do they realize that they are in his power? So people may not even know that they are already under the influence of superintelligence. And in general, as Irving correctly noted, if he does not kindly share with us the ways of keeping himself under control, this intelligence will need us at best as much as the beekeeper needs the bees. A little thought experiment. Imagine an ultra-intelligent machine designed for interstellar travel, with the machine itself on board. The machine is constantly evolving, taking unprecedented measures to maintain the performance and safety of itself and the apparatus. Therefore, it is not threatened by asteroid encounters, and in general, a rocket created by superintelligence would probably be virtually indestructible. In the course of its journey, it may well create even more advanced intelligence that will create more and so on, to infinity. And so, this rocket, with an infinitely evolving intelligence on board, is traveling through our universe. What will it encounter? What heights of development will it reach? Will it know everything? That's a strong possibility. Remember, we said that epistemological optimists agreed that the universe is not infinite, but current thinking tells us otherwise. So what about this? This is where George Cantor and his set theory can help us again. On the one hand, we have the infinity of the universe. On the other, the infinite perfection of the ultra-intelligent machine. How do we reconcile the two? Look, this machine will need to achieve a power of the set of its knowledge and abilities, equivalent to the power of the set of the universe. Will it be able to achieve this? It is the outcome of this race that will answer our ultimate question. It is a pity that the answer to it will be recognized by something else, unimaginable and alien. It turns out that mankind is literally doomed to a technological singularity, with all the resulting threats to itself. And we have no hope for cognition of everything. If we look at the situation from the other side, according to our forecast, the number of registered patents in 2022 should have amounted to just under 2 million. That is, to show a growth of about 11%. Unfortunately, there is no information on that number yet. However, there is a UN report on the number of applications filed, whose graph is not only almost identical, but also directly related to the one we are considering. If we make a crude assumption, from the point of view of statistics, this graph should have grown by a similar amount, 11%. However, this crudeness is easily offset by the fact that, according to the report of February 28, the growth was actually 0.3%. That is, it was less than the estimated 36.5 times. The number of parameters that must be taken into account to predict the time of the singularity is incredibly huge, and even a relatively insignificant event can change this forecast. Mankind is a society, a giant system, subject to epidemics and wars, economics and politics, and therefore, contrary to the beliefs of many, quite unpredictable. So perhaps we still have time. Is it possible to know everything? I would like to believe that there is a way. It's unimaginably complex. We will have to circumvent millions of threats and limitations. But mankind in its history has repeatedly proved that grandiose goals over time become great achievements. What was unthinkable in the past is now commonplace. What was considered impossible has become feasible, and all thanks to the human desire for knowledge. Therefore, each of us can make a small contribution to reaching the limit of knowledge, and perhaps, in this endeavor to find our own limit or to face its absence,